Hello and welcome to this week's Programming 2 and Object-Oriented Applications YouTube video. This video is for Week 2's lab. So after completing the lab exercises, you should know how to define a Java class and be able to choose appropriate data types for your Java class. You should be able to take English descriptions or descriptions of problems that you want to model using Java code and be able to write constructors to create and initialize objects. So as before, you're going to create a new Java project in the previous workspace that you used last week. We call it Lab 2. So in this first exercise, you're going to create a Java class in Eclipse, the public class book, and it's going to contain a string called title, another string with the name author, and an integer that stores a number of pages. And in a separate class called bookInputTest, we'll write a main method which instantiates a new book object and initializes the object's attributes using keyboard input obtained from the user. So our console output should look a little bit like this. So enter the title of the book, the user enters this title, the author name, and the number of pages, and then we instantiate the book object and populate it with the appropriate values from the input and print it to the screen. So let's get started, shall we? We go to Eclipse and create a new Java project. It's called Lab 2, and we start by creating the book class. So just call that book, and it contains a string, which is the title, string, which contains the author, and int number of pages, let's say. Save that. Then we create another class called bookInputTest, like that, and then we create a main method, public static void main. You should be used to this by now. String, args, and then some brackets. So the first thing we want to do maybe is create a book object. For instance, we can just say book, a book is equal to new book. That creates a book object, but what to do about getting the input from the user? Well, as you recall from last week's lab, you can create a scanner object, call it keyboard. Of course, Eclipse doesn't know what scanner is, so we're going to have to use the import statement, import java.util.scanner, and that takes care of that problem. And now we can prompt the user for some input. We could say system.out.println, please enter the book title, like that. Maybe we want to use that a couple more times. Please enter the book author, and please enter the number of pages in the book. And of course, we can ask the keyboard to get some input. So we're going to use next line, and this returns a string which we can then associate or assign to this attribute called title. So this reads input from the keyboard and assigns it to a book.title is equal to whatever was read in from the keyboard. What about the author? That's quite easy as well. Book.author is equal to keyboard.next line. Again, reads in a string and associates the object reference of the string and assigns it to a book.author. And finally, book dot number of pages is equal to keyboard dot next int. In fact, we're reading in an integer value, so this actually returns an integer, and that stores it in number of pages. So interestingly enough, this stores a string object reference, this stores a string object reference, and this stores the actual value. Now we'd like to be able to print this out in a meaningful way, so if we want to mimic some of the console output, here we have something very similar. Please enter the number of pages. So we want to then print out the book title is, and the book author is, and the book has 150 pages. So let's do that. We can do system.out.println. The book title is, and then we concatenate to the end of that a book.title, and we can do another system out. The book author is, and then again we can output the author. And then we do a system.printout. The number of pages is book.number of pages. So let's see what happens when we run this. We have some console text here, so we can say, please enter the book author, Raymond Chandler, and the number of pages, 1, 2, 3. And quite predictably, we get the results. So as an extra step, what might be useful is to debug this program. So let's set a breakpoint here. I double-clicked here to set a breakpoint at line number 6. And instead of pressing run book input test, we're actually going to debug book input test like this. So this opens the debug window. And here we have a list of variables and our code. And our code has paused its execution, and it's paused on this line right here, line number 6, where we set the breakpoint. So if we step through this by pressing F6 or clicking over here, you'll notice that our variables have, in our variables is a book is listed, since we just instantiated a new book object, and you'll notice all of the default values. Author is null, which points of course to the null reference in memory. Number of pages is by default 0, and the title is 0. And if we press F6 again, we get a scanner keyboard. Now this object is slightly more complicated. You don't need to know all of this. You can see just how complicated that all is. It's not necessary to know that, but it's interesting to look at. You can just close that. Let's look at a book. And as usual, it's going to ask us to enter the book title. So let's just press F6. Please enter book title. And if we press F6 again, you'll notice that I just executed line number 11, so it's waiting for some input, such as The Big Sleep. And you'll notice in abook.title is stored a reference to The Big Sleep, which is a string of characters. And if we step over again, we can ask for the author. We can enter in any string we want, but I'm kind of stuck on this example, so let's just do that. Raymond Chandler. Again, as you might have guessed, if we go down a little bit, we have the author has been changed to Raymond Chandler, and we can enter in the number of books and the number of pages in the book. Again, it's asking keyboard.nextInt, and we can enter in any value, such as that one. And of course, we get the number of pages, 771. You can see that just if you move that just below right there, that's the value stored. So these are the variables, And these are the valuables stored, these are the variables, and these are the values stored in the variables. So we can just step through like that, and it prints it out. You can see it at the bottom here at the console. And lastly, you print that one. And then we're pretty much done. We can press this red terminate button to stop execution or continue as long as we want. So that's the video for week 2's lab. I encourage you to continue on and try to do as many of the exercises you can do in the lab. And if you don't finish them, then you're more than welcome to carry on at home and to continue there. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.